This is a video to show you how to paint the Great Unclean One, or Rotigus. So this is the finished product, and I'll show you how we got here. So this is going to be a video on how to paint the Great Unclean One. So previously in the channel we magnetized it, therefore we could be able to build both a Great Unclean One and Rotigus. And if you look in the channel, you'll find a link to that video. We've got all the parts laid out in front of us. What we're going to want to do is paint them up. But what we did first is we primed it with Corax White with a rattle can there, and that got us to where we are today. There's a video on the channel on how to prime a lot of pieces at once. If you take a look for that, I'll put the link in the description. First thing we're going to want to do with the Great Unclean One is we're going to want to paint the sort of the gaping maw, stomach, mouth that's here. So what we're going to want to do is get in there with a little bit of color first before we start painting the outside. That way, in case we make a mess, it doesn't affect really the rest of the model. What we're going to use for that is a Screamer Pink, a nice watered down layer. So we'll set that up now, and then we'll meet back here in a little bit. So now that we're done with our Screamer Pink, we did the mouth as well as any of the open wounds that are available on the main model. So as you can see here, here, around back as well, same thing. They really stand out on the white background, but we'll deal with that. And don't mind if you got a little bit messy, because we'll clean that up as we're doing the green shade as well. After that, we also did Rotigus' mouth, leaving the pile of beetles clear. And this hand has a mouth attached to it as well. And then just the normal gaping mouth here with the tongue for the Great Unclean One. Now, what we're going to do is shade the Screamer Pink. So what we're going to do that is with a Nuln oil, and that's going to darken all these areas here and get them nice and rotted and festering. So all we're going to do in these cases is just take our brush and Nuln oil right inside of the opening. Once again, don't worry if you slip out, because we're going to fix it when we do the green. As you can see there, that looks festering and icky. And we'll do the same with the arms. So we'll allow that to dry, and then we'll come back and do a highlight layer on all of the wounds. Having the Nuln oil dried now, what we're going to do is do a dry brush layer of Pink Horror over all of the open wounds that we've got there, sort of adding some light to them. More or less like that. finish the dry brush layer of pink horror, what we're going to do is add a dry brush layer of Cadian flesh tone. Just add one more highlight layer. So once that dries, we'll reassemble that and we'll move on to the next color. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take a watered down layer of Nurgle green and we're going to cover pretty much the entire model. Anything that's going to go green later. It's a very watered down layer. And it may even take 2 coats to put on, but basically it's a very watered down layer that we're putting on here to get in all the crevices. So we've got all our Nurgle green finished now, and all of our wounds and things like that also finished. So what we're going to do now is just an overall shade on all of the green area using the Athonian camo shade. So I've got some mixed up with in a smaller pot because quite frankly the other ones tend to spill. So I'll take the big guy here. And put a uniform shade all over, driving it into the corners where we can. Really bringing out all of the highlights there. Sort of like that. Being careful around our areas not to get any in the red, but lighting up everything around it. So I'll finish with this and we'll meet back here in another few minutes. So we finished the camo shade, and as you can see, the details have really popped out on the model. Any of the faces and the heads on board really, really make them look good. What we're going to do now is add a bit of a highlight layer of that Nurgle green again, and just over the top, just to lighten up the areas that got shaded. So we're just going to do a little bit of a dry brush, and just sort of the top here. And don't worry that it doesn't match. The Nurgle green does dry a slightly different color than it goes on. So it will match as it dries. So now that we've got the highlighted and mostly just the green on green on green, what we're going to do is now start adding some of the detail. So I'm going to take a little bit of this Ungor flesh. And what we're going to do is with a fine detail brush, we're going to start doing all of the pustules. We'll take a couple of coats because you really want to water it down. So we're going to start doing all of these, and then we'll meet back here when they're all done. So now that all of our Ungor flesh is now finished, and we've done all of the boils and pustules, what we're going to do is before we shade that, we're going to do these tentacles as well here. What we're going to do is do all of them even the little ones, all with a base coat of Bugman's Glow. So once again, being careful not to go over our Nurgle green layers. We're just going to start base coating these tentacles here. So now we've got both the Ungor flesh pustules done, as well as the Bugman's Glow tentacles. So with having both of those done, what we're going to take now is just an overall wash of Carlsberg Crimson, going over both of those particular areas. So in effect, what we're going to do is add some red to all of the pustules, and that'll make a nice swollen area there. And as well, what we're also going to do is add some red around all of the wounds that are there as well. So what we're basically going to do is this. A little bit of crimson right there and around the area just to flare it up a bit. Here, like so. Still brushing on the Carlsberg Crimson. Just to create as much of a sickly view as we can. Because of course, a Great Unclean One should not be clean. So we'll just wait for that to dry. So what we're going to do now is all of the bone and teeth all over the model. And what we're going to start with is a base layer of Xandri dust, which is great for doing bone. We're just going to very carefully, with a detail brush, do each of the teeth. Like so. So we're going to keep doing through all these teeth, as well as the teeth on the stomach, the teeth on the arm, and the teeth on the other two heads. We're probably also going to do the horns on their head as well. So we'll do all that and we'll meet back here. So after we're finished doing the Xandri dust, what we're going to do now is take a little bit of Agrax Earthshade and really shade in the horns and the teeth and everything else to get a nice shaded, detailed appearance. While we're doing our Agrax Earthshade there, we're going to find any spots on the big guy like this cracked skin here, and we're going to Agrax Earthshade that area there. What we want is also as much of the brown to settle at the top, so we'll store it shade down just to let it drip and settle as it will that way. The beetles in the mouth we'll also do with a regular shade just to make them more visible. And we'll brush them later with another color. Like so. So we'll finish the rest of the models. We'll meet back here. Now what we're going to do now is we're going to highlight some of the tentacles and things like that. And we're going to get a little bit of layer of pink horror. What we're going to do is just dry brush over some of the tentacles here. So we'll take this head in particular and we'll just lightly dry brush an extra set of color in there. Just add a little bit of tone. So something like that. Now we're going to take our fine detail brush and we're going to go back to our Ungar flesh. And what we're going to do is we're going to take all these little pustules and we're just going to light up the center of them. And that makes them sort of ready to pop in that gross, disgusting kind of way. We'll do that for most of the model and then we'll meet back here. So now that we finished our Ungar flesh, what we're going to do is start on the wood of Rotigus' staff. So what we're going to do is start off with a base of dryad bark. And we'll use the dryad bark. We're going to water it down quite thoroughly and we're going to do the entire stick. With a nice thin coat, watered down, so you get some good coverage. So we finished with our dryad bark base, and I took a little bit of the leftover Ungar flesh, and I just filled in the little fungi that are on the side of the staff. So everything looks very, very nice so far. One of the other things we can do is we can darken up the tops of these horns with a little bit of very, very watered down dryad bark as well. I'm going to soften it with just a little bit of water just to pick up the excess brown. Just like that. That makes the horns a little bit dirtier and a little bit darker. So we'll just let that dry upside down so the rest of the color just sinks. We'll do the same for the Unclean One horns as well. And we'll do it to just Rotigus as well. So now we're going to start on the metallics. So we've got the bell, the sword, the knife, these things here, which are all the weapons, and we're going to do them all in a base coat of lead belcher. So we're just going to coat all of them just like so. Being careful not to go over our green, because it's very hard to replace at this point. But it's just an overall brush of lead belcher. We're going to avoid doing the skulls in the center of the sword, because we're going to save them for a different color. So basically we're just doing all of the trim. You want to make sure your paint is very watered down, because you're going to want coverage without brush strokes. Yeah, but the metallics, they really do stand out. You may want to mix it with some flow aid. So for the flail, I really do recommend that you use flow aid mixed so that it really flows into all the grooves, because otherwise getting it into all the details, especially in the back sides, down and in and underneath, is practically impossible. So you definitely want to do your best to make the paint as runny as possible to get right inside those rings and those details. Don't worry about the smoke from the decanters. We'll handle that when we do a different color. So now that we finished all of that, what we're going to do is start doing the brass areas with Balthazar Gold. Once again, mixed nicely with flow aid, because what we're going to want to do is get it in all the pores. So we're going to do all of the skulls that we skipped. As well, we're going to do the trim on the bell. We're going to come back and do this handle with wood. So we'll come back and do a little bit of dryad bark there. And then also, we have to do all of the little bells that are all over the model in different locations. We're going to do those with Balthazar Gold as well. So we'll get started on that, and then we'll meet back here in a few minutes. With our metallics finished, what we're going to do now is the base of the bell, as well as the skulls on the bottom of the flail. We're going to treat all these as stone. So what we're going to do is base them with a layer of dawnstone. So I'll finish these off and we'll wander back in a minute. So now that we have all the metal finished, what we're going to do is start shading some of it. So we're going to take some Nuln oil. I'm going to start shading all of the lead belcher that we put on already. So I'm just going to take a little bit like so and darken all of the metal that way. We're not going to do the stuff we did with brass, because we'll do that one in a moment. But we'll do all of the weapons, as well as the armor on the lower half of the main body. So we will finish shading this, and we'll meet back here in a few minutes. With the Nuln oil finished, what we're going to do is a layer of Agrex Earthshade, and we're going to do that over all of the brass trim. So all of the skulls, all of the designs on the end, all of the bells. We're also going to do it over the entire wooden branch. That'll fill in any of the little spots we missed, and as well as the little decorations hanging because they're gold, and the fungi which are growing on the staff, which are going to get shaded as well as the bell and the handle there. So we'll start doing that with the Agrex Earthshade. just like that. So we'll continue on doing the bell. Now what we're going to do, since we have all the shading done there, is we're just going to dry brush a little bit of Celestial Gray over the skulls, just to lighten them up a little bit, just like that. And we'll do the same to the handle of the bell. Like so. The next thing we did was took a very, very light dry brush of Gorthor Brown, and we went over the stick itself, trying to lighten up and create a two-tone approach, so you really start to see the details, just like so. Now you have a more rustic, wood, twisted, gnarled look that really stands out. While we're still on dry brushing, we're going to take a little bit of our Nurgling Green, which we haven't used in a while, and we're going to take anything that has an open wound on it, such as this mouth right here, and we're just going to dry brush the trim of that just at the edge. Just like that, same as the edge over here. Being very careful not to get into the wound. It's all coming together. Now we're going to start highlighting the metallics. First thing we're going to use is Iron Breaker. And what that's going to do is allow us just to add a little tiny bit of dry brush highlight to the disease sword that we have here. Something like that. Now with the knife, we're actually going to lighten it up a lot more than that. Because we're going to really brighten the knife up as we go here. Not bad. And then we're not going to do the bell at all, but we are going to do the links on the flail. With just a little dry highlight. And then finally, we have to do the armor on the back of the outfit here. Like so. And then we're going to use Brass Scorpion. I'm going to use that to highlight all of the brass metallics. We'll be doing the skulls on the center blade here, as well as the ornament design. ones on the sword as well. And then we'll just finish off by highlighting all of the bells, including the ones on the staff, and the one remaining one here on this tentacle here. Like so. So now what we're going to do is take a little bit of Rune Lord Brass and come at the little knife. And this is a nice blend of both colors. Like that. And thus we have one really, really bright weapon. And then the dirty, dingy old knife, the sword. And all we're going to do with that is just highlight the tips of the skulls. Like that. There's now only two main areas left to deal with. One mainly is the cloak, and the second one is the hood on Rotigus. Both of these are going to get a base coat of Naggaroth Night, and we're going to do them in a nice shade of purple. So we'll do that now, and we'll meet back here again. So with our base layer of Naggaroth Night finished, you can see both pieces here. What we're going to do is shade it now with Druchii Violet, and that'll help darken the color as well as bring out the highs and the lows. So we'll leave that dry. After the Druchii Violet shade finishes drying, we're going to do a highlight layer of Xerxes Purple just over the high areas to give it a two-tone effect. And then we'll do that and come back here. So now that we've got the Xerxes Purple as a highlight over the top of that, we're finished with the cloak, and the only other thing to work on is the smoke coming out of the flail. So what we first did is that we took a base coat of ceramite white and really brought out those smoke pillars from 1, 2, 3 decanters here. And then what we're going to do, some Nighthaunt Gloom technical paint. I'm going to use that to highlight the smoke completely. So we get that type of effect there. And then what we're going to do is take a little bit of moot green, and we're going to just fill in the edges. So you get that sort of effect there. So the last thing we're going to do is just do the eyes with a very fine detail brush. And that's using Uriel Yellow. I'm going to do the same with the other two heads. like so. And this is our final model. As you can see, we've based it, and it's magnetized, so we have several incarnations. This is Rotigus here, with the stick as well as the outstretched arm. So we can happily take off all three parts, replacing them with a generic unclean one. For your typical unclean one vision, as well as the third option, which gives us the flail and the sword. So I hope this video was helpful, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, leave a like on the channel or subscribe to the channel, and we will see you the next time. All right. Have a nice day.